back to my channel, my 605 Speaks peeps. I'm so excited because today we're going to do multiple things. We're going to talk about why, even though most of South Dakota is considered I-29 or I-90 related, we're going to talk about why you should get off the interstate. But also, it's my new 2022 goal to get my guest for today to start a podcast called the Pod from the Sod. That's if he does it, I came up with the name. Just remember that. You will know his voice for sure. Maybe you haven't seen his face, but maybe you've caught him on television here or there, particularly if you are a fan of pretty much any South Dakota related sport, event, or activity. Now, I personally don't sport. The only sport that I understand and follow is mixed martial arts. I understand two people duking it out for blood and glory. That's it. If there's a ball involved, if you got to wear a helmet, if it's synchronized, lost me. But occasionally I will get a reference correct, like about how good the Knicks were in the Super Bowl last year or something like that. And Mike will be like, good job, Jenny. Good effort. So welcome to my stage and screen, Mike Henriksen. Hello, sir.
Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for having me. And you're right. I know you don't sport, and yet somehow you and I have been able to connect through the course of the years. So that's we're willing to look past that.
We're just a nice little pat on the head and be like, yeah. And just for anybody watching, I know the Knicks were not in the Super Bowl. It was the World Series. Everybody watched. It was a big deal. Actually, other than watching the Super Bowl for halftime shows, the only time I've ever sat down for like a major national sports type event was when the Cubs were in the World Series.
Oh, really?
I was at Icon Bar watching it with people.
Right. Well, and it's interesting that you and I ran into each other at an MMA event because there's so many South Dakota kids that have chosen that as their profession, and I wanted to see what it was all about. You had been talking about it for a long time, and it was out at the Pentagon. It was great fun. I was very, very glad that I took it in. I got to meet Bulldog, David Michaud, who I had talked to on the phone several times, but had never actually met him.
Seen in person.
So yeah, it was just, that was a good night. And it's probably the only night of our lives that you and I will ever sport together.
Yes, that where I might have actually understood more of all of it than you did.
There is no question you did. Not that MMA is that tough to understand.
No.
Right.
You're either choking someone or being choked.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's more nuance to it than that, but if you're a newcomer to watching it, those are some key points to look for.
Yes. Yep. Don't get choked.
Right. Good life advice.
Exactly.
Speaking of not choking up, your professional career is don't choke. You're on the mic. The mic is always hot. For years, I'm sure you thought that was just people making reference to you. But I often tell people, remember, in this world, you're probably being recorded. So make sure that you get your licks in. But tell us a little bit about how your professional career as a sportscaster took you all over the state of South Dakota. I mean, you've probably physically touched down in more minor towns than major areas than most other South Dakotans have.
There's a good chance at that. Several years ago, in the early part of this century, and I just say that because it's so odd to say, we actually got involved in, and I had been to a lot of small towns before, obviously, because my work in radio, whether it was in Gregory, I was, broadcasting in Geddes or, the towns in that area, or when I was in Mitchell or Madison, I was kind of the small town in the area guy. But a few years ago, my friend Dave Kemp from Sioux Falls had a project where we researched WPA built athletic facilities. And for those that don't know, the WPA was put together by Roosevelt back in the late 30s. It was a way to employ people and yet also benefit the communities. It allowed an awful lot of people to eat. It allowed an awful lot of people to stay on the farm because they would work all day for $1 an hour, and then they would actually go home at night and farm.
Yep.
But we had no template. So literally, my wife and I would spend 7 hours on a Sunday afternoon or whatever driving on, and we would go driving through to see if there was a WPA built football facility. Most of them were gymnasiums.
How would you know? What would be an indicator?
First of all, at the beginning, they all have a plaque. All right, they've got a plaque mostly on the outside. Some of them are inside, but eventually we got so familiar with the architecture that we could say, oh, that has to be a WPA project. The gymnasium in New Effington looks exactly like the one in Edgemont, and you can't be farther away in the state than those two are. But they were using the same plans. Right. And not all of them obviously are like that. But yeah, so I love the back roads. I love small towns. I grew up in a town of 300 people and have always been a small town kid at heart. And I often say this, I'm the only adult in my family that is not an educator. Brother, sister, in-laws, wife, kids, son-in-law, daughter-in-law. But had I not done radio, I might have been a history teacher.
Yeah.
So, because I love that in all of its forms. And so consequently, that was great fun, but it also took me a lot of places I wouldn't necessarily have been.
And I have always been someone that as a driver myself, and I used to have to drive quite a bit for a past career adventure of mine, and that was involved going to small towns. But I don't know at what point it was hammered into my brain that the easiest, fastest, shortest route is always going to be take as much of the interstate as you can. And I've never broke that habit. And right. I-29 between Sioux Falls and Brookings has been a slide rule for me since I was in college in Brookings. And I-90 between Sioux Falls and Rapid City has been a slide rule. And I have wasted many years not getting off the interstate. Now, on the day earlier this month when the sky turned green and the storm that has now become internationally famous for what happened in Sioux Falls,
right?
I was driving from Mitchell to Sioux Falls in that storm and did not have a choice. We had to get off the interstate because a semi was down. So I drove through Canastota, literally watching the winds. I was following it and coming up on silos that were turned and crunched, and one unfortunate cow that got lifted and landed and didn't do so well. And I thought, of all times for me to get off the interstate, like no good pub and grub bar and grill is going to be open now.
Right.
And then when I got back to Sioux Falls, I was so stressed from that drive. All I wanted was a Cinnabon from the Flying J. And they had no power when I got there. That was when Sioux Falls had no power. I was just like, what the heck? Yeah. So you may have to convince me that leaving the interstate is a good idea.
Listen, Canastota, by the way, that is the home of Sports Days, which just wrapped up a few days ago. I think it's the last week of June. So you probably want to avoid Canastota. Just you. Everybody else can go to Canastota.
But I would be wildly confused.
You would be. You'd be.
What are these people doing?
You'd be overwhelmed. And yeah, it's just, go to Canastota anytime. Just don't go during sports days.
I'd have a football helmet on, some kind of lacrosse racket thing. I'd be riding a horse because that's what we do.
Right. No,
in South
it's
Dakota.
Canastota has a very nice little bar downtown. Of course, it's also the home of the Ortman Chiropractic Clinic. Which
yes, they're pretty famous for that.
Yeah, brings people from literally all over the world.
It does.
There are just so many things in small towns. And Jen, listen, I have made it a mission to be intent on taking the back roads. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are times that I have to get to wherever I'm going as quick as I possibly can. But there have also been times, for instance, traveling out to Rapid City to do a state tournament for South Dakota Public Broadcasting. There were times that I could leave on that Wednesday whenever I wanted. And so I would get out to the Badlands and I would cut down to Igloo and I would cut down to Highway 18 and drive through Pine Ridge, and there are so many people in this state that have never set foot on any of our native reservations. And honestly, in general, they're gorgeous. The only images that we ever see coming out of there are, of poverty and despair, etc. Not that doesn't happen, but Pine Ridge is literally named because there is a pine ridge. It is gorgeous. I would especially, the first time I was there was in the fall, in birch trees and etc. were turning. It was just absolutely gorgeous. So there are times that I do use the interstate. I'm a big fan of Dwight Eisenhower, but but I also will intentionally try to take the back roads as often as I can.
And I still haven't been to the area that when I did this project in 2020, you talked about, is it Riva? Up in maybe it was Toby that mentioned this, that there's a national park up in the northwestern area that you said that's the most beautiful place.
Oh, Twin Buttes.
Buttes.
Yes. Yep. Or not Twin Buttes. What are they? Yeah, kind of up in the Buffalo area. Up in the Northwest. Yes. Slim Buttes. That's what it is. Slim Buttes. Just out of the middle of nowhere. Yeah, we were up in Lemon, which this was back when I was starting my individual radio show, SportsMax, and I stopped into the radio station in Lemon. And the fact that anyone just randomly stops into the radio station in Lemon is not real common. They were delighted to see me, but you get up to that part of the state, and there's actually, the legend is that a lot of those farm homes up there, one of the main parts of each home was a library, because back in the 1900s, early 1900s, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and what I describe it, there's a lot of sky in that part of the world.
Yes.
And so people would have home libraries to actually entertain themselves. But yes, Slim Buttes is absolutely gorgeous, and I'm not sure that. And by the way, Buffalo, home of Harding County School, has a statue of a horse
instead of a buffalo. This makes sense.
Yep. It was apparently it was a famous horse in the rodeo days of the 20s and 30s. And for Harding County, that's absolutely perfect.
That fits perfectly. Yeah. That's rodeo country and ranch country. That's really, I want to talk to somebody, over here, I think of farmers, and out there, I think of ranchers. And there are farmers and ranchers all throughout the state, but there's definitely an imagery that says ranch.
Well, and one of the things I've discovered is that, we have a great debate, East River, West River. Honestly, my personal thought is that West River doesn't begin at the river. It kind of begins at 281, which runs north-south. And because west of there, you have Miller and you have Sully Buttes and you have, all sorts of ranch type area. And yet it's still on the east side of the river. So
I think West River begins at Mitchell.
Okay. All right. I'll grant you that. I think we're 30 miles off or so on our definition. So,
I get to Mitchell and I'm like, what are all these hats? Why does that man have spurs on? They know we're still over here, right? But yeah, with that little bit of discussion about stopping in Pine Ridge and Native connections, you've made some really amazing Native connections with some folks in the lower Brule area and have done some amazing things, even throughout the pandemic, figuring out ways to safely bring supplies and things, almost in an Old West style. You packed up the wagon and brought supplies out when things couldn't come and go, and met people when it was when, in my opinion, when the tribal authorities were the only leaders in the state that cared about any goddamn one of us, and they closed down the access to their people to protect everybody. We could have all been doing that, but whatevs. But when it was, you were bringing things and meeting people at the line so that they could have things for the kids and getting masks and getting things. Talk about your experience with that.
Well, first of all, that's very kind, but I really haven't done very much. I'm just simply a facilitator. The amount of people that have helped us out, boots on the ground, Kansas and Kyle Middleton, have been my brothers out there. And
they are beautiful people. I want to interview them, and by beautiful, I mean they're really beautiful. I'm sure they're very nice and good quality people as well, but I am very, very superficial.
Yeah, I got no problem with that. I'm not wild about taking selfies with them. All right, I the bar is raised pretty high there.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Jen, I had gotten to know them through a previous organization, and frankly through Tim Weidenbach, my buddy who runs Higher Power Sports out of Parkston. And I always, whenever I talk about Tim, I say he runs Higher Power Sports. Tim is Higher Power Sports. That's it. It's a one-man operation. His wife helps him out a little bit, or quite a bit, but Tim is Higher Power. But he had let me know, and when the pandemic hit, and I saw that our governor was mad at the tribes for setting up checkpoints, I thought, well, something there just doesn't ring true. And I thought somebody should look a little further into this. And then it dawned on me, hey, I'm somebody and I have time. And so I contacted Kansas, and we did a series of Zoom calls, and because he was talking about the fact it was just simply to keep people safe so that they could do contact tracing, so that, they weren't keeping anybody out of the reservation. But here's the thing, over the course of the years, the minute, natives in this state and other states, people of color, period, have been pulled over and treated poorly by people with weapons for a long time. All right. Mm-hmm. But and this wasn't the case in Lower Brule, but it was at a couple of the reservations. But that if Karen gets pulled over by a native with a weapon, it's time to call the manager. And that's exactly what they were doing. And so, Christy got upset about that. And so anyway, it grew from there. Kansas was talking about their needs. They have almost no healthcare facilities. We were able to take out PPE and cleaners of all sorts. And that kind of built into school supplies. And my buddy Bruce Milliken does bicycles. He's done that for Pine Ridge for years. We expanded that and got it to Lower Brule, and we'll take out household goods and clothes and that sort of thing. It really has been a wonderful learning experience for me. And what's
been really, really great is just in the last few weeks here is I follow Kansas on social media, and seeing him bring those kids here to play sports. And also with InnoSkate that happened in Sioux Falls, the kids from Pine Ridge, they came here to skate. And I'm like, those are the little faces that we were helping. Exactly. They made it. I mean, like we saw really sad stories of, there was, it was farther west, but one of the reservation teams where their coach had to post, like half their team lost a parent or grandparent. Boom, 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 boom from coronavirus. He's like, my team are now orphans.
Yep.
And that hope that, oh my gosh, did all those little kids make it? And they've come over here this summer and shown us that this is what the tribal elders were protecting.
Exactly.
And I was so excited to see those little kids.
And the Kansas, and again, if you're looking for Kansas on Twitter specifically, it's Superman, SIOUXPER, which is just perfect. But yeah, he posted the video the other day because he's coaching. I think those kids are 13 or 14.
Mm-hmm.
And he just posted that video of a bunch of kids being dorks. You know, and it was heavenly. It was just, and especially to see the smile on Kansas's face, because he knew that that's what his goal was to let these kids be kids. And so when you actually see a face as to who you are helping, I think that makes a big difference. There is one other thing that I would not have been able to communicate without Kansas. This year, Red Cloud, the girls basketball team, made it to the state tournament that I was doing for South Dakota Public Broadcasting. And they had shooting shirts. Those are warm-ups, by the way, Jen.
I was going to Google it later.
But they had shooting shirts that had Red Cloud in Lakota on the front. And then there was some saying on the back. And so I asked, and Matt Rama is the coach out there, who is such an amazing human being. He and his wife are just incredible. But so I asked someone, I said, all right, so what does the back say? Well, as you know, in Lakota heritage, the Unchis, the grandmothers, are revered. And you don't have to be a blood relative to be an Unchi. And what it said on the back was, our grandmothers were fierce warriors. We are fierce basketball players. That is how we honor them. And without the background that I have gotten from Kansas, I'm not sure I would have asked that question 5 years ago, you know? And I know that people, I heard from all sorts of folks across the Native American community that appreciated the fact that, we took the time to ask. So that was one of the more. And then the following week, Lakota Tech was in the tournament, out in the boys tournament. They had also been in the girls. And the number of folks that came up and said, that they were appreciative of that all goes back to Kansas. I was just the messenger on that. And it's such a gorgeous language. There is no way that Danish Nebraska pig farmer was going to attempt to say what those words were, but I certainly could tell you what they meant. Right.
And they played like they meant it too.
They did. Yes. They were fun to watch.
Yes. One, you talking about you were just the mechanism for getting the story out. Let's talk about, let me turn my little ticker on. Let's talk about being the mechanism for getting the stories out. The best storytellers know the best storytellers. That's why it's easy for me to find people to talk to. Tell us about Genuine Journeys of Life, volume 1 and 2.
Yeah, I've got we've got 2. In approximately January or so of 2020, Cindy Bahi, a longtime friend of mine, she and I had worked at Kello back in the 80s. She was in TV, I was in radio.
The 1980s, right? The 1980s.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Not the 1880s.
You ageist, you. Um, but Cindy she knew that I had done a book before. I had done a sports book, Genuine Journey, excuse me, First Person Legendary South Dakota Sports Stories, which was a compilation of interviews that I had done with sports folks in the state, which, by the way, quick plug, I hope to have another one of those out very soon. But she knew that I had done one. She had actually written a fiction book, and she approached me and said, how's about if we get everybody's funniest stories? And we talked about that a bit and thought that was good. But then Jim Valvano is a famous coach from North Carolina State who passed away a few years ago. And the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research is actually named after him. And he gave a speech at the ESPYs. And in the speech, he said, if you laugh, if you think, and if you cry, you've had a full day. Mm-hmm. And so we decided to use that as the template. And you're right, we do know some pretty doggone good storytellers. We reached out to folks to share those stories. Genuine, everything from heartbreaking to hilarious, but all short stories told by the people who lived it. And the response to that was really good. And so we did Genuine Journeys of Life too, because so many people, we knew there were other stories. We had a couple in our hip pocket. And so many people would come up to us and say, hey, did I ever tell you about that time that I, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, so the response has been really good. And it's a very good summertime reading book. It actually comes with its own bookmark that matches the cover, which, by the way, Cindy is a wonderful photographer. She did the cover art for both books. And you can read a chapter, put it down for a couple of weeks. You don't have to remember the plot. You don't have to remember, okay, wait a minute, who was Bill? It's just, you can pick it up, and some are longer, some are shorter, but yeah, it's been a really fun project to be involved in.
They're the kind of book that you might keep in your bag or your purse or in your car for when you're waiting at the doctor's office and you need to read. Or if you're a passenger on a road trip, not if you're a driver, don't be doing that. But if you're a passenger on the road trip, it's a good, like you said, you can start it on the way out for vacation. And if you don't pick it up again until you're driving home, it's and you can finish a story between towns.
You can, as a matter of fact. And that's the thing. It's really been, folks have the fact that people are willing to share, in some cases, their most vulnerable moments or their most depressing moments or their most uplifting moments. Just the fact, and again, this goes back to me and my love of history. You can document that in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
And the fact that people have been so gracious to share those stories. I reached out to my buddy Don Jorgensen. People are kind of surprised about this, that he's in our second book, because it was, not very long ago that Don and his wife were in the motorcycle accident. I reached out to Don and I said, yeah, I know you did a 5-minute piece on it on TV, which is longer than most. But I said, would you mind writing that for us? And so he got much more in depth and, talking about the rehab and the recovery and all of that. Our mutual friend, Dave Holly, shares the eulogy that he wrote for his dad that he never got a chance to give. These are really some personal and insightful moments that people have been gracious enough to share with us.
I last semester for Ollie, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, I do Lection every semester, and which we're bringing Lection back to the public, and you better come because everybody loves to hear you read. But I brought, because I was in the middle of reading it, I brought the first volume, and when I do Lection, I always just pop open the book and just hit it wherever random. I surprise myself. Now, in your first volume, I think I know personally like 6 of the people. So there was good odds I was going to read a story that I knew. And I popped it open and landed on Toby's story about his road trip with his dad before they found out what his prognosis with this cancer was going to be. And so I'm reading for just 2 minutes in front of strangers, but I'm hearing the voice of someone I know. And I remember being his friend during that moment and what he went through. And I'm reading it and feeling it. And that's the thing about all those stories. They're so down to earth, is
right.
You could feel like you know all the people.
Yeah.
This could have been my family and I could have experienced this.
That's the thing. The majority of the people in there are from South Dakota and people that Cindy and I know. But at the same time, the stories are pretty much universal. And my buddy Bruce from Phoenix, he's an Iowa guy originally. He's the hiking Viking. He was the one who, during the first parts of COVID, decided to hike the length of the Rocky Mountains at the age of 62. You know, so there are universal truths in those. And like I say, it's just, we were so grateful to the people. Nate Knuth telling about racing his newborn to the emergency hospital up in Minneapolis and how that has affected his life ever since. So many incredible stories. Brian Shawn from Midco Sports talking about his early diagnosis of colon cancer. I think he was 37, you know, which that's not, you know, supposed to be when you get colon cancer.
Right.
But he wanted to share that. He was gracious enough to share that so that people would get checked, that they would be aware. So, yeah, and we've still got a few more in our hip pocket, and we'll see when volume 3 comes out. But it's been fun.
Your upcoming project with that's more similar to your first book is going to be the same thing. Like, that was kind of a compilation of interviews you had done with a variety of sports figures,
right?
Because you have a long archive of interviews.
I do, and yes, it will be the same. It will be just simply transcribed interviews of some of the folks that I've talked to. With the first one, with the first person, legendary South Dakota sports stories, if I only did one, I wanted to make sure that it was balanced, that it was ethnically balanced, that it was, physically balanced, from West River, that there was a good balance of various sports in there, that there were people you had heard of. And
coaches and players and different roles in the games.
Yeah, and Dan Jensen, who didn't start running until he got a prosthetic leg, and now does ultra marathons. That's just remarkable to me. But this one will, because I put out that first one, this one will be a little bit higher profile, folks. And unfortunately, there's some of the folks that are no longer with us that we've just lost in the last couple of years, or maybe farther back. But yeah, just another way to chronicle that history and to make sure that these tales are told in their own voice. People always say, so Mike, when are you going to write your book, with your stories? And what I always tell them is, too many people I know are still alive. So consequently, that won't be happening.
I just keep hoping that you're not telling your stories, because that means you're going to run for office.
Oh goodness, Jen, that's interesting.
Once the stories are out there, then it's like, are they going to still run? Because there's got to be something we find out when they're out trying to knock on doors. So I just assume that there's still a Senator Henriksen potential out there.
That's very kind. I had this conversation last night. Guys my age that look like me haven't really done a whole hell of a lot of good so far. So I don't think that we really need another one. All right.
Could maybe redeem it for your demographic.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
maybe.
That's one of the words so many people come up with when they think of Mike Henriksen. It's redeemable.
Yeah. Not redeeming, but redeemable.
Yeah. So yeah, I love politics, and I enjoy the fact that I can now, share my actual thoughts now that I don't have advertisers and I'm not doing South Dakota Public Broadcasting and those types of things, because I understand how that all works. I understand how it reflects, but there has been a great sense of freedom, I guess, the last couple of months. Not that I kept my mouth shut before. A lot of people are still the stick to sports guys,
Right.
Here's the funny thing, though, Jen. So if I'm all right, you talked about a Super Bowl party. So if I'm at a Super Bowl party and I'm chatting with a guy about the game, do I ever ask him, what do you do for a living? And if he says he's a mechanic, do I ever look at him and go, yeah, stick to cars?
Yeah. Right.
I just don't understand this, mindset that we can only allow you to be one thing. But here's the thing. I still live in the same world that you guys do. I still have, the government, public things have effect on me the same as they do you. And therefore I'm entitled to my opinion about it.
Right. I think too, and I've said this for a long time, when people meet someone, a lot of times we're like, well, what do you do is how we ice break. And everybody talks about whatever they punch the clock for 9 to 5. Right. And I'm often prone to being, and I used to say, and Patrick Lally made me a little bit famous because I off the cuff answered him once this way. I used to say, well, I'm pretty and I go to things.
Right.
And so they're all like, what is that? And I'm like, well, I'm pretty and I go to things. Like I like to go to art. I like to go to festivals. I like to go to sports I understand. I'm that, what do you do? I'm pretty and I go to things. And then people would be like, and that's how is that your job? And I would be like, well, you didn't ask what my job is. Right. You asked what I do. Yep. And I think more of us need to embrace talking about what we do at the core of who we are as people. And I think our conversations would be better.
I agree wholeheartedly. When you and I are together, how often do we talk about work? I'll check with you because something is relevant or whatever.
Well, yeah. And everybody is like, because we know that for most of us, 40 hours of our week is our job. How are things going? It is part of your life. But but then everybody needs to turn to talking about
who we are.
What's making it worth putting in our 40 hours to have time to do later, Exactly. And a lot of my friends that are performers and artists and things like that, they'll tell you about that. And then they'll say, but my job is, or what I do is this, but I wish I could do this. And I would say, well, why don't you just start saying, first off, I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I'm a musician. Say that first. Let that be your job. What you do to pay your bills. I don't care how you keep your electricity on,
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That is a great point.
We need to just start claiming that up front as that's what I do. And when I'm not doing that, I do some other things.
I had a conversation with a good friend about this. Now that I have stepped away from broadcasting after 46 years, how do I introduce myself? But hearing what you have said, I may just start going with, hi, I'm Mike, and I'm a concert goer.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. Yeah.
That's what you do.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yep.
Well, I want you to say I'm Mike and I'm the host of the Pod from the Sod, because I know that you have decided to do the ultimate white guy retirement thing and hang out at golf courses. Like, could you be any less creative on that?
Well, you got to cut me some slack here. I work at the golf course. It's not that I'm hanging out at the golf course.
You are telling people you work. I haven't seen that. Of course, it's because I never go to the golf course.
Right.
But I really do. I wish that you would just like mic up and just ramble some of your thoughts while you're out there. And that's your Pod from the Sod.
That's very kind, and that's a very good idea. But seriously, I do still fill in for Mark every now and then. Mark Hovenden, he and I did a daily radio show on 15 stations called Calling All Sports, and I still fill in for him sometimes. But in all seriousness, I got out of it because of the fact I'm not as good at it as I used to be. And there are a couple of specific examples. There were some folks who were very, very good to me early in my career, and I have always tried to help out young broadcasters and encourage them and do, whatever I can, just like those folks did to me. John Egan, the longtime sports writer for the Argus Leader. I'm a kid in college, and John Egan was treating me like a peer. There was no reason for him to do that, but I was appreciative. But I also paid attention, and there were some folks who stuck around too long. And I noticed that, and I knew that I didn't want that to be me.
Right.
And I made that conscious decision. And so when the time came, I pretty much knew that it's just time. You and I have talked about this, and I use this quote. My good friend Tom Lawrence did a nice article in the South Dakota Standard. You've heard me when my tremors get into my voice. Nobody wants to listen to a baritone Katharine Hepburn. All right, no, that's just the point of stuff. And so no, I have been. Did I reach the heights of my career that I was hoping to? Heavens no. But did I enjoy it? Heck yes. You know I did, Jen. I've had a ball, and I've had a hell of a run, and now it's time. And here's the thing. One other thing. Over the course of the years, like especially people at my ad agency, I went through, they would say, well, you can do a podcast. And I said, you know what I think most people with a podcast would like to have? A radio show on 15 stations every day. I think that, maybe it's just me, and maybe that's old-fashioned, but
I think that we're all hoping, though, that if you're doing a podcast, it's uncensored. It's the raw deal. It's everything that Mike almost could have said just off the cuff.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Which everybody says to me, they're like, you keep saying this is not monetized, this is not sponsored in any way, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I don't want to have to edit.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I don't want anybody I'm talking to have to edit. I want them to just be themselves.
That's
okay. Because now we're coming to the crucial part of today's interview.
Okay. And by the way, thank you. We'll discuss this further. You brought up an aspect I had not thought of. So
yes, unedited and uncensored.
I will tell you one quick story. Several years ago, one of the calls that I'm actually known for, the winter Tri-Valley game came down, high school football championship game, came down to a last-minute Hail Mary. The game itself was horrible. It was just dull, and I thought both teams were going to take all three timeouts into overtime and just keep playing slugfest. Winner decides to go with the Hail Mary. The ball is tipped, and the kid catches it in the end zone, and they win, and the whole place goes crazy. My only disappointment that day, because one of the wide receivers for winter was a kid by the name of Eric Sheet. And had he been the one to catch it, I think that would have been my only opportunity to yell out "Holy Sheet" on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Now I'm sad that you said that out loud, because now somewhere he's going, I missed my chance to be.
No, actually, I've stayed in contact with him through the years. Zach Horstman was on that team. Eric, I think, is maybe coaching up at Presentation now, somewhere in the northeast part of the state. But yeah, it's again, social media being what social media is.
Well, and here's why I can't be sponsored or advertised right now. I'm not saying I can't be. Everybody has their price. Mine is.
Oh yeah.
Mine is, Taco Tuesdays for life. But it's because I'm going to ask you the key questions. Where, when you're advertising, not only can you not say certain things, but you can't play favorites, because if your favorite is something different than your advertiser's favorite, that's not good. I want to know, as someone who's traveled the state, best pub and grub. What's the best off the interstate bar food in South Dakota per Mike?
Jenny, are you suggesting that I found any bad ones?
Look at years and years of media training right there.
Honestly, one of the best places, and Deb and I, when we lived in Dells, we used to travel up there, even though it's like an hour and 15 minutes. The Waverly Steakhouse is unbelievable, and we'd go up there just to have supper. I got to tell you this. I've got a story about that. Do you have time for one?
Oh, always.
Okay. So one year I'm doing the girls' state basketball tournament in Watertown. And I happened to mention on Friday night of the broadcast that I'm hoping to get over to Waverly to the steakhouse between sessions. And the weather was turning bad and stuff. And so I said, I certainly hope. Well, I got over there. The weather was just starting to, typical March snowstorm. I get over there, walk in at 4:00, which is when it opens. And the guy goes, "Hey, are you the guy that talked about us on public TV last night?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, you have to meet the owner."
Oh, wow.
But here's the funny part. So the owner comes out, and this was charming. Don't get me wrong. This is more self, putting myself down more than anything. So the owner comes out and goes, "Oh, you talked about us last night. Do you know Doug Lund?" And I said, "Yes, I do. I've known Doug, for a lot of years." He goes, "He was here once and he wrote about us in his blog, and he brings out, he's got a printed everything with pictures and various other things. I'm the guy who talked about him on the air last night. He's showing me Doug Lund visited 12 freaking years ago and
blogged about it."
Exactly, and blogged about it. But as I have told Doug Lund, that's the difference between showing up, a couple of times a year on South Dakota Public Broadcasting, as opposed to being in everyone's living room every night for 30 years. So, yeah, I will say also,
every night for 30 years, he couldn't just say whatever he wanted.
No, heavens no. Heavens no.
Now he can.
He can and does. And by the way, just to be clear, that is not the first bar that I've ever been in where they said, "Do you know Doug Lund?"
Later, when we're off air, I have a Venn diagram Doug Lund, somebody I knew in theater that got to punch me in the face story, but we're not going to record it.
Okay. All right.
Fair enough. What about best place to stay that's not a chain? Have you ever stayed in a local B&B or a local, or
Yeah.
even if it's in a chain, best small town to spend the night in?
Honestly, even though the last time I stayed there, it was for something horrible. And I don't know if this is, still that way or not, but the motel in Parkston, South Dakota had, without question, the most comfortable king beds I have ever enjoyed. And when my late friend Tom Maxwell lived down there, I'd stay there every now and then. Haven't been at that motel since his funeral. We were there for a few days, but that motel at the time was heavenly. Now, also understand, Jenna, and I let you know about this. I was in a motel this weekend that I had stayed in 20 years ago, and not a single thing had changed, including probably the towels, because they were just paper towel thin at this point. So that's an old recommendation. I have stayed at Strawberry Hill B&B. That was very nice, just outside of Deadwood. You know me though, Jen. There's times, when I'm on the road, I could probably sleep in the parking lot of wherever.
As long as it's in a Buick. Those upholstered seats are like couches.
They are, absolutely. Did you know, by the way, though, that I got a different vehicle?
That you left the fold. I know. It's kind of like when I had to tell people for years, I always drove a Cadillac DeVille, and then I would get a different Cadillac DeVille. And then I went to a small car, and people were like, what the heck happened? And I saw that you've left the Buick fold. I don't know if the people at Buick know.
I drove the Buick LeSabre for about 20 years. And they get 28 miles to the gallon, and they ride like a couch. And when they blow up, you go find another one for, used. And, but I decided here in March, as a matter of fact, that I'd always wanted a Chevy Equinox. And I found a Chevy Equinox used, still over 10 years old, but I'm liking it. But the bad thing is with the Buicks, every time I got a different car, I still knew where everything was.
Yes.
I know how everything works. I bought this car up in Aurora, and I'm driving down the interstate after buying the car, and I'm having to call the owner and go, how do I turn up the radio?
Right.
So, yeah, it's been different.
Yes. Yeah, the sweet spot for Cadillac sedan DeVilles is the 89 to 91s. If you stay right in there, it's the same beautiful magic carpet ride. And all the knobs, everything is the same.
Yep.
Yeah. My last one was haunted when I had to buy its previous owner. And when we sold it, I was like, I warned the next person. I'm like, so if you're driving and all of a sudden it flips over to AM radio and smells faintly of cigar smoke, that's he likes old country, Waylon and Willie and the boys.
Okay.
And I missed that car. Well, Mike, thank you so much for chatting with me. We haven't seen each other for a little while because I'm semi-isolating and quarantining again because COVID is on the rise, as well as monkeypox.
Yeah, well, I'm going to count on you to be our guide for monkeypox. You've done a great job helping us out with COVID and informing us and, letting us know where, vaccines are available and that sort of thing.
First thing with monkeypox, don't touch a monkey.
Okay. I think I'm safe there.
Yeah. If you see a roving monkey in South Dakota, regardless, it's probably either got hantavirus or bubonic plague.
Yeah, it's probably not good.
Don't be messing with that. But other than that, yeah, the same advice as always. Don't sweat the small stuff and don't pet the sweaty stuff. Yeah. Next time we get together and chat, I hope it's at the Gateway over Tots.
That would be delightful. It is always so much fun to chat with you, Jen. And I really appreciate the time. Thanks for letting me talk about the book and various other things. And yeah, now that you pointed out the uncensored part of that podcast, maybe that's kind of what I use Twitter for. But you can follow me at Mike Henriksen. But I don't swear on Twitter. I could in a podcast because That's a funny thing. People are often caught off guard when I swear because I spent 46 years not,
right,
you know,
right.
At least not on the air, but I did in real life. And I don't swear a lot, but yeah, that people kind of, when I do drop one, it's like, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I have to say, as far as running into you and meeting for Tots and the Monster Burger, the Rentschler, the very famous Rentschler burger at the Gateway here in Sioux Falls, I will tell everybody this. It's like going there to hang out with a Kardashian. I walk in the door and the servers know who's there to see Mike. He has a corner table that, like, once you've been there to hang out with Mike once, the servers have tagged you and they're clocking who's coming in. And they're like, yep, he's at his table. And they'll remember your drink because you're there with Mike. And you barely get to talk to him because everybody in the bar is there to come talk to him. So it's like, it's like hanging out with
Norm from Cheers.
Norm from Cheers. Yeah. All right, sir. I'm gonna sign off on this one.
Jen, this was a delight. If you would just allow me one more moment.
Sure.
Thank you so much to everybody who has helped us out with supplies of various kinds and money that has gone out to help with heating bills and electric bills. Again, Kansas and Kyle Middleton, they are boots on the ground. There's no application process. There's no anything. They just get stuff to the people that need it the most. And so I am so appreciative of everybody who has supported those efforts. And we will be asking again. It's just about time to gather up school stuff. So, but I have to say thank you to them for the all of the support that we've gotten on that.
Yes, they are amazing. They are amazing, and they know the right people because you're the right people, sir.
Thank you.
And Mike is the definition of Midwest good people. I mean, he started out in Nebraska, but he straightened out in South Dakota. He got it figured out up here. Just genuine. It's a great title for a book that he would have anything to do with, to have the word genuine in it. So very, very much excited to see what he does now that he's turned to compilation and writing. And I'm still going to keep leaning on him to have the sod from the pod, because I would love to hear unedited inner monologue from Mike Henriksen. Thank you, everybody. Follow up if you know anybody. I do want to talk to people I don't know. Strangers, bring them into my house through my webcam. Coming up in August, I'm going to have a panel of weather people. We're going to talk about weather across the South Dakota. And I've got somebody that's going to talk about weddings in South Dakota pretty soon. And somebody that I was introduced to by Mike that I took a liking to because he's got a great Irish name. And I believe he will probably be the most uncensored, candid interview I will ever do in my lifetime. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up next week. Bye, everybody. Be good. Stay off the Twitters.